Try not to fall off the chair. Right, evening again. It is still Saturday, 8th of October, and we shall crack on with a sample donated by the almost ever-present Andrew A.P. Butler. Thank you very much, sir. And this is Locke's 8-year-old single malt. So it's named after a gentleman called John Locke, who I'm fairly certain was also the name of the character in Lost. I watched the first season of Lost and then just got bored of it, but I'm sure he was the guy that was started off in a wheelchair and ended up being quite a key character throughout the entire series. But John Locke, the one that we're talking about here, took over the Kilbeggan Distillery in 1843. The Kilbeggan Distillery is here. We have covered it off earlier in the run of Irish whiskies, because we had the blended whiskey, which was very, very good indeed. And it stayed in the Locke family until it was sold to an Austrian conglomerate in 1947. And when Cooley took over the distillery when the distillery closed down, the Cooley Distillery, which is here, took over the brands of Kilbeggan and Locke's in crap, didn't even write that down. But they bought the license to release Locke's and Kilbeggan. So this is made at Cooley at the moment until Kilbeggan gets properly up and running. So it's a single malt whiskey that actually says on the label, this is what the full-size bottle looks like, pure pot still. But from what I can read up on, this is a single malt whiskey. This isn't the pot still Irish whiskey, the pot still version that Irish whiskey is more known for, which is where they're using unmalted barley as well. However, in this, they are using unpeated malt as well as a small amount of peated malt. Now, Connemara is also made by Cooley. They are using, at the moment, peated malt from Scotland, probably Islay, but Scotland anyway. So it's entirely possible that they're also using a part of that into making this as well. Cooley opened in 1987 and they launched Locke's in 1992, and it was their sort of single malt brand, whereas they've got Kilbeggan, which is their blended, Tyrconnell is another blended, and Connemara is their peated single malt. And Connemara, I'm sure, did I write that down afterwards? I'm sure that came out after Locke's. Yes, because that was in sort of the late 90s that Connemara came out. So interesting to see how much of a peaty influence this has, because as far as I'm aware, this is predominantly unpeated malt with a little bit of peated thrown in. So let's see how we go. You're looking at about 34 quid a bottle, 8-year-old single malt. The Napogue Castle, which isn't made of Cooley but is a single malt that's a 12-year-old, is 40. So 35 quid a bottle, probably about a fair price, to be perfectly honest. Now, 8-year-old is fairly young in Scotch, and in Scotch particularly as single malts, it tends to be 10-year-old upwards. But they've released this as an 8-year-old pretty much since day one, so they're obviously happy with it being that younger age. Colour, oaky Chardonnay colour. Whether there's been colouring added, I've no idea, couldn't find out, but possibly with it being so young. It's, I believe, bourbon matured, I think. I could only find one reference to it, and even then it was a little bit sort of hazy as to what it was. So an 8-year-old with that colour, if they've not added colouring to it, quite possibly. Now, there's a bit of an odd nose on this, and I think it's an element of the small amount of peated malt that's being used, because it's not quite smoky. Connemara, obviously peated, just totally, yeah, that is a peated single malt. Whereas this is, there's a very, very faint element of peat, and it's earthy peat, which makes it smell a bit foisty. And there's an earthiness to it, but it's a slightly vegetal earthiness, and it's just a little bit unbalanced. It's weird. Sometimes you can nose it and you go, oh yeah, there's peat, and other times you go, no, actually there's something off here, it's not quite peatiness. Yeah, not sure about this. that was weird. So nice, quite a nice full mouthfeel actually. Quite rich on the palate. Very, very silky. Not a great deal on the palate. And then all of a sudden, just as I was swallowing, running across the centre of my tongue, was almost like coffee beans and earth. And it's sort of there on the finish as well. I'll be honest, there's not a massive amount of flavour on there. But what there is it's quite rich, it's quite honeyed as well. There's a definite malty character to it. But it's almost like this small element of peated malt is not quite cutting through. So it just kind of pokes through these little bits of, and it's not even smokiness, it's like earthiness. It's a bit flat, to be perfectly honest. There's not a huge amount to it. The mouth feels good. It feels quite rich on the palate, but there's not really any flavours coming through. And then there's a bit of sweetness. There's a maltiness to it. There's a bit of toffiness, but then is toffiness even a word? There's just this kind of little element of, and it's more earth than smoke. It's peat earth rather than peat smoke or anything like that, and it's a little off-putting. It's not really enough. It's almost like it needs more peated element to it to really cut through and go, yes, we've got some peatiness in it. Not as intense as Connemara, not as full on as Connemara, but enough where it's almost, well, am I peated? Am I unpeated? Am I peated? Am I peated? Well, I can't really decide, so I might give you a little bit of each. And it just doesn't, it's lacking one way or the other. Either go unpeated and give me some more malt, more toffee, there's a bit of fruitiness in there as well, more of that, or give me more earthiness and more smokiness and really let me play with it and appreciate it. And this is just kind of like, can't really decide what it wants to be, and it's not really being either. It starts off really good. The mouth feels really, really good. On that mouthful, I got a little bit more peatiness, but it's still not enough. It gets washed over with the mouthfeel, which is a bit of malt and a bit of toffee. And then that dies away as well. There's nothing on the finish, to be perfectly honest. There's very, very little indeed. It's a bit of a letdown, to be honest. There's not much of anything. Everything's a bit washed out, a bit plain, a bit flat, and it feels like there are some flavours there that just aren't given a chance to come, and it's almost like two different whiskies that are trying to combat each other and just cancelling each other out rather than one taking over the other. It's not even unbalanced because there's not a great deal to balance. But it feels like it should go either that way or that way, and it's just stuck in the middle going, I don't really know what to do. And it just falls flat. I was quite looking forward to that as well. I was more interested in this than I was in the Po Castle, and yet that was a much more interesting whiskey than this. But hey, you live and learn. Andrew, thank you very much for the donation. Interesting. But yeah, not one that I am going to look for in a bottle on the shelf. Right, that's me done. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my Saturday. I shall see you at the next one. Cheers.